All right, looks like we are live. Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert, and we are going to be reviewing a video that Rabbi Tovia Singer and a Muslim woman named Kara, I'm not sure, Cora the Tammy. I'm probably butchering this. This is the first time I'm actually seeing her content. I'm friends with Rabbi Tovia Singer. He is a friend of mine. We've had him on the channel before. We've obviously teamed up, if you will, on critiquing Christianity. And I've learned a lot over the years, even with my interviews with Rabbi Tovia Singer, coming from an Orthodox perspective, as to why I think even in the New Testament, he's maybe missing how many Jews operated, midrash, pesher, all sorts of stuff. And I see this in Paul. I see this in other places as well. And so this is going to be, I imagine, a friendly critique, because I started watching this last night as I was in bed, and I just got back from being with family. My mother-in-law is, spending the last few moments she has with her daughter. She has terminal stage 4 cancer. And I thought, oh, wow, Rabbi said some things. I'm like, I disagree with my friend here. So I'm going to cover some of this material. I don't want to pretend that I know better. I don't know the languages or stuff like that, but I'm going to be approaching this from a critical, scholarly point of view. And I want to say this up front. I'm not a Jew. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Christian. I think some of the things he says will land, or at least I can agree with him that that's not what the texts are saying when a Christian interprets a text a certain way. However, I'm looking at what he says about it, and I think I don't agree with you on what the text says either. I've caught some flack years ago. They're like, why didn't you give any pushback to Rabbi Tovia Singer? First of all, he's a friend. I had him on to collab in an effort of showing why Christianity isn't the case as an ex-Christian. Seems to me that the Muslim girl here is also kind of doing that. She's teaming up with Rabbi over against Christianity, right? So they're not really critical of each other. They're kind of working together and pointing out Christian interpretations of scripture are often wackadoodle. Got it. I'm just trying to come in here and be like, let me be fair. Let me give you my thoughts. Why not? So before we begin, let's get this intro going.
Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
All right. I guess I'm Moses. Okay. I guess I'm Moses. What's up, everybody? Good to see you in the chat. Saeed says, wait, no way. Yes way or Yahweh. Elias, good to see you here. Are you sure she's not a samurai? She looks like a ninja. Maybe. Watch out. You never know. So who is right, Derek? You? Are you sure? Let's see. I would say I think I'm on the right track, and I'll have to show you some evidence to support what I say when I do bring up something I think is a mistake on Rabbi's part. We are Myth Vision. That's right. Bakken in the house. Good to see you. Just got back from vacation. Hope y'all are well as we can be. Good to see you. Someone writes, Jesus. You had interviewed him before multiple times. I actually met him in Israel when we went and did a tour back in, I can't even remember what year at this point. Before the war, I could tell you that. You're a damn heathen, Devo said. Yes, indeed. I am Moses. Indeed. Fair, allegedly, Fred said. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I know. I mean, look, I think that you can make a good case, okay? I think you can make a good case to show why some of the things Rabbi might say are wrong. Some of the things we need to discuss here real quick. Christians and Jews Rabbi Tovia Singer is an Orthodox Jew. She's a religious Muslim. I don't know if she shares the same thoughts about the Bible as Rabbi would, and of course Christians. They see the books as single units, right? Whereas textual critical scholars see layers of composition. They see all sorts of issue, redactional stuff interpolated or changed over time, and a constant flowing and changing of material. So, for example, Isaiah's made up of 3 different Isaiahs. One book we read in our Bible, 3 different compositional layers have been discovered by scholars, and many reasons why. We won't get into all that today. We're not even going to be able to cover the whole video here with Rabbi and her. But it's important we point out that Zechariah is made of 2. Deuteronomy, right? A book he would say is written by Moses is likely a 7th century or even later composition. There may be older material in there, but scholars see that as something that's 7th century, likely, somewhere around that period. That's at least what consensus scholars put it at. So Moses is not writing of his own death. We know who does. The Psalms are not by David, even though they get attributed to David later by rabbis. And I think that's important. The vowels. So he's going to bring up some stuff about vowels. I'm not a linguist. I don't know Hebrew. I don't know Greek. Okay. I know Rabbi is not familiar with Greek. As far as I am aware, he knows Hebrew, but a lot of this stuff is medieval. So you're going to get the Masoretic kind of later understanding of this material. The same way I feel like, I don't want to, this is not to be disrespectful, but I do feel like a lot of Orthodox Jews, I believe Rabbi would fit in this category of the Masoretic Hebrew is like the King James Bible for the King James onlyist, in a sense that it's the most authoritative, trustworthy Hebrew text. And you really could look at the Septuagint and go, or any other text. It only gets used. The Greek text will get used when it helps the cause, right? You will get an authority kind of thing from Rabbi about reading Hebrew, and that's true. He can read Hebrew, but it still doesn't make something factual or correct. So I could talk to scholars who read the Hebrew and study the stuff, which I do on a regular, and they would walk away and go, no, I'm not buying that, and here's why, and they'd get into whatever. Now, he is natively speaking Hebrew or modern Israeli Hebrew, so I don't know what goes on with the language there. So maybe we just get this party started and see how this goes. Smash that like button, everybody. Again, Rabbi, if you're watching this and you come across this, I love you. You know that. You're my friend. I just think it's only fair. I can give my own 2 cents in as you are giving your position. I've done it with Christianity all the time. I've done critical videos of Islam. And, I do a lot of critical stuff of the Old Testament. But I don't think I've really ever spent the time of pointing out where I think a rabbi may be mistaken on something in the Bible. So this will be friendly fire, so to speak, towards some of the things I think he says. All right. Without further ado, if you're looking for the original video, you can find this on Tovia Singer YouTube channel. He's grown his channel quite a lot now, 130,000 subscribers. He says, powerful interview, Muslim presses Rabbi Singer on the Trinity, Scripture, and faith. And here we go.
And I believe the verse is...
Let me actually put the audio in my ears so I can hear it not come through my computer. All right, here we go.
...that come right after speak about the practicing of idolatry and things of that nature. Over and over and over again, we see this.
You're being very charitable. You're saying he didn't read it. I don't believe that at all. I think that the Christian Bible...
I hope the music doesn't ding me, because he probably uses the same software as I do, and hopefully I have what's it called? The music is the same, and I have contracts with them, so I should be good.
The Bible is a crime scene.
He said the New Testament is a crime scene, I think.
Right. Hello. Assalamu alaikum to all the Muslims that are going to be watching, and I hope everybody else that is watching is having a good day. And today we are going to be having an interview with Rabbi Tovia Singer. How are you doing today?
Walaikum salam. It was very, very nice to be with you. Thank you.
Of course, of course. All right. So, first off, I wanted to preface by saying I really do believe that you have a lot of knowledge with regards to the Hebrew Bible. So I did want to have some, questions about specific interpretations of verses that a lot of Christians use, or a lot of Muslims, or whatever it may be. And I want to go ahead and get your perspective on those things.
Sure.
So, the first verse that I wanted to ask you about it's in Genesis 1, right? So in Genesis 1, it's verses 26 through 27. God is speaking, and he says, "Let us create man in our image." How would you respond to somebody who says that this is evidence of a multi-personal or triune God?
By the way, great question. It is a great question, Cora. Is it Cora? Everybody in the chat, do you know who this female is on the left? Cora? Is it Cora? Is that how you pronounce it? But it's a really good question. What does it mean? Let us make man in our image, right? We're going to get into that. Let's hear what he has to say, and we're going to have to take a little detour, because I saw the very beginning of this and I thought, okay, you could see the limits, I think, of where Rabbi is willing to go on in terms of this interpretation.
What a tragedy that is. What a tragedy that people should hold such a holy book and worship idolatry when doing that. So as it turns out, man is creating it in a unique way. We know that in the book of Genesis, and it's also in the Quran, in that man is binary, which means God collected the clay of the earth and blew into it his spirit. In Arabic, it's kind of like a word like nefesh in Hebrew. So therefore, man is made of two things. Unlike frogs and chickens, and I know you, the viewers, love your dogs. Your dog is not created. We'll just use the term in the image of God, and I don't know what that means, but that means a dog or a gorilla does not
I would just say image of God means you look like. Now, I know this is so post, like their interpretive models don't even open up the door for that, but to be made in the image of God, it's pretty simple and straightforward to me, is that you look like the divinity. And you get the same Hebrew word 2-3 chapters later with Seth, I believe it is made in the image of Adam. Same Hebrew word, being made in the image of. And I think that's a pretty obvious one, but that's approaching it from an ancient Near Eastern context, not from some modern Christian or even rabbinic, or, going down into the Islamic period. I think that makes the most sense of the text in its original context.
Have a divine soul in it. When God came to creating man, he took the clay of the earth. And what's striking is that we now know that we're actually made of stardust, which is very, very striking. He shaped it into the form of a man and then blew into it his spirit. So if in some way the creation of man was conveying, as Christians argue, the doctrine of the Trinity, then why isn't Jesus also creating light? Or why isn't he creating the animals or the fish? Why didn't he say, let us make fish? See, if Jesus is a part of...
I'm going to give you I'm going to get sources here. Let me come to me for a second here. Great point, Rabbi. Great point. Why not let us make fish? Why not let us make, the sea creatures? Because the biblical text was written not by fish, and it wasn't written by sea creatures, and it wasn't written by birds. It was written by humans. And humans believe they are reflections of the God, or really God made them in, his image. And it's plural here, and then it's singular, but we're going to get into that in just a second. So why not say, let us make fish in our image? Because fish don't look like the gods. In this text, based on the worldview of the writer here, birds don't look like gods, fish don't look like gods, but humans do. They look like gods. So it's a pretty no-brainer to me, even though I know Rabbi's getting deep into this, and something just dawned on me. How many of you watching grew up watching some of the debates, like on the Line of Fire? Lee Strobel had a show at one point, Christian apologist, where he would bring on like William Lane Craig against Richard Carrier popped up. Back in the day, you can go see young Richard Carrier debating William Lane Craig on the resurrection appearance in Paul. I believe, I talked to Robert Price, said that he appeared on Lee Strobel's show too. They didn't air it, I think, or I got to go check Lee Strobel's website and see if I can find it at some point. Because that's like, I remember downloading and buying these CDs back when I was a Christian, and Rabbi Tovia Singer came on talking about one God, only one God. And he was debating William Lane Craig. I can't remember. But like this guy, he's a historical figure in terms of arguing with Christian apologists. And I used to look at him and go, no, he's wrong. But he was charming in a way. He had a funny way about him and everything. So it's really interesting just sitting on this end, picking apart things I disagree with the guy that, has been inspirational in many ways. It's really interesting. Anyway, have any of you watched that? Have any of you seen that show, Lee Strobel's Line of Fire, back in the day when you were, I don't know, younger Christian apologist? I was a Hitchens guy back in the day. I didn't like him back in the day. I was too much of a fundy. Why are you bringing up Lee Strobel? Because he appeared on Lee Strobel's Line of Fire. Anyone else seen that? Is a smooth operator. Yeah, he is. Let me see. Nobody. So nobody's responding. Nobody. 82 people. None of you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's just go back to the video. Okay, Jason says they've seen it. You should host a debate between Tovia and Michael Brown. I'd love to do that at some point. That'd be great. I don't think Tovia has interest in even talking with Michael Brown the way things went back in the day. Donnie says, I saw it, bro. Yeah, that was a time in my life where I look back and go, wow. So, okay, yeah, I'd like to have that happen. But you know what's unfortunate, Jason, is I talk to Tovia every once in a while. We have a WhatsApp call and talk because he's all the way over a whole nother country. I try to set up a professional debate between him and other Christian apologists. And I reached out to Mike Winger at the time and several others, and they said the same thing. Have him debate Michael Brown. Like, none of them want to touch Tovia Singer. That's an odd thing to me. Maybe when Michael Jones appears day after tomorrow, Inspiring Philosophies coming to my house day after tomorrow. Maybe when he comes here, I'll ask him. He does debates. Would he be willing to debate Rabbi Tovia Singer on the topic of is Jesus the Messiah, or did he rise from the dead? I don't know. Some question relevant to a topic that Tovia is interested in. But none of them wanted to debate him. They always keep coming back to Michael Brown. Oh, have him debate Michael Brown. That's it. That's the only person that will clearly on the Christian apologist side be willing to debate him. It's interesting. All right, going back to the video.
The Creator, as actually stated in the prologue of John, why doesn't it say anywhere else? What's unique for man is that man literally is summoning two things. Number one, the physical material of the world that he had already created. Everything else that God created was created ex nihilo, which means from absolutely nothing. That's what unique is about God.
Well, that's obviously another disputed thing. Is it all created ex nihilo, or does it seem to have in the Hebrew there indicating when God began creating, as if there was already a heaven and earth, but then he's now filling those things up? A lot of ancient Near Eastern Hebrew Bible scholars point out that seems to be what's going on.
Well, when it came to man, he took something that already existed, the clay of the earth, and then something else, and that is that metaphysical soul, that spirit, whatever that is in us, and that's why it's let us. Those two things combined together, and pow, we have man. And again, that's why God doesn't say, let us make light. Doesn't say, it's only man that's binary. It's completely unique.
So the binary nature, if I'm understanding Tovia correct here, he's saying the clay and he doesn't know what the essence of it is, but it's the soul or the spirit being breathed into man. So the clay and this is this binary thing, which is why it's plural. I obviously differ, but let's hear what Cora says if she responds to that, and then we'll get to some sources.
I see. So in that portion of the passage, the way that I usually interpret it is, so in Genesis 1, verse 26, it says, let us make man in our image. The verse following right after that, I believe it's verse 27, it then repeats and it says, so God made man in his image. Would you say that that is an evidence that it's not a multi-personal God or a triune God?
Not when speaking to a Christian. It means if you as a Muslim and I as a Jew were having a conversation, because we worship one true God, the only true God, one being, one person, alone. So we can have that conversation, you and I, and we would agree on that. That's correct. Let us, and then it goes to the singular. But the problem is when engaging a Christian, and both you and I do that, we don't want to fight. We want them to repent of idolatry. That's our goal, or else what are we doing here? So the Christian would then go, aha, that's the nature of Jesus. There is a triune nature, a three persons and a hypostatic union, all grotesque Greek philosophical ideas that the church still to this day doesn't agree on. But whatever that means, they'd say, aha, so there you have the plurality of the multi-persons, and then you have the oneness in verse 27. And that's why, as an apologist, you're a person who engages in apologetics, you're opening the door for Christians to go, yeah, there's the three and one, three and then one. And in fact, I would just say, and I think you would agree with me, it doesn't really answer the question. We really want to know, why is man created of multiple things? Now we know we are actually, in some way, we have an immortal soul, and neither of us are going to pretend to know exactly what that means, but we're created in God's image in some metaphysical but grand plan. The whole world is created for us. So I believe that you always want to give the clear, direct answer. And this, of course, harkens to Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, which we find in the next chapter, where God collects the clay of the earth and breathes in the spirit of life, which is found in the Torah. Of course, it's in the Quran.
Yes, I see. So in terms of the language that's used in Genesis 1:26, if a Christian were to come to you and ask, what is the reason for this plurality in the passage when it says, let us make man in our image? What is the significance of this plurality if not a multi-personal God?
Oh, so we answer very simply, and that is God is summoning both the physical and the spiritual and saying, let us make men in our image. When God created animals earlier, or fish the day before, the stars and the moon on day 4, did God summon the nephesh, the soul? The answer is no. And that's why there's no us. It's so transparent that when man is being created, God is actually using something else besides him, meaning something that has already been created, namely the clay of the earth. So saying us, he's never done this before, and that's why you'll never find us prior to it. The Christians are going to be in a terrible predicament here. Now, we don't want them to be in a terrible predicament. Cora and I just want Christians to repent of the doctrine of the Trinity. So this is not a game at all. We don't want to hurt Christians. We want Christians just to worship the one true God. But yet, you only have a very short time. You got to tell them what is really happening here on the atomical level. On the atomical level, what God is saying is, he's saying it to the world, the earth that's already been created. Let us make men in our image. And that's what we are. I mean, we know this, that you and I and a dog share something along the order, like 98% of our DNA is in common. That means we're basically made up of the same stuff, a walking protoplasm. So what the difference is that we have a soul, they don't.
Exactly, I see. All right, beautiful response.
Okay. So that I gotta say it. I disagree as nice as I can to my friend Rabbi Tovia Singer. We clearly don't agree on this one, and it's pretty obvious to me you have a divine counsel. And this is where I actually got to give some credit to people like Michael Heiser, who caught a lot of crap and still post-death catches crap from Christians who say it's the Trinity. And they say Heiser taught heresy, Heiser taught, all sorts of falseness, and you know how it goes, heresy hunters and stuff. But to argue that the plurality in that text is it was kind of hard to make out exactly what it is. Is it the earth itself and combined with with the soul. Who's the us, and what's going on here? I brought some sources. We'll come back to Rabbi's video here in a moment. I believe I have. Let's get this here. Okay. First, let me show you something older than the Bible. Okay. We're going way, way back to the Enuma Elish. All right. In the Enuma Elish, it's quite an interesting, story. It's very ancient. It's a Babylonian creation epic. It's written down well before the Hebrew Bible. The gods gather as a council and vote a young god, Marduk, into kingship over them so he can fight the chaos monster. It's a creation myth and an individual deity who's being voted in as the chief god. So you have a singular deity being chosen among an entire assembly, a council, and going down to the appoint. So, O lords of the gods, destiny of the great gods, if I, your avenger, conquer Tiamat and give you life, appoint an assembly, make my fate preeminent and proclaim it in Upsu Kinaku, seat yourself joyfully together with my word. In place of you, I will decree fate. May whatsoever I do remain unaltered. May the word of my lips never be chanced, nor made of no avail. Just obviously, it's a similar picture to what you're finding of a single ultimate deity who's the chief on the throne, but he's surrounded by a council of people. That's that plurality. We're going to see that in the Bible in just a moment. Okay. You also have in the Ugaritic text, close and accept. In the Ugaritic text, you have El and Yam at the divine assembly. And with raised voice, they summon the divine assembly, which most scholars, I'll pull up some books here, actually say that the biblical tradition is just in continuity. It's just a later Canaanite reformed tradition. It literally is out of the Ugaritic or Canaanite tradition that we're finding the biblical text grow out of. So with raised voice, they summon the divine assembly. They beckon those from afar. The congregation of El they call. El presides in his banquet hall of the eternal one. O ye divine, to the abode of your sovereign, who swiftly crosses over the land, who proceeds, who partakes of the curdled milk in abundance. He holds a chalice within his grasp. Anyway, Yam and El are there, and it's this council of deities that are at this get together, if you will. So this is much closer to home, if you will, if you're trying to look for something that's closer to where the biblical stories would have taken place. And they dug these tablets up. I believe they're 13th century, 14th century BCE. They could be 12, but they're older than your Bible, but in the same area, same neck of the woods. So the high god is El. It's the same god El that is named in the Bible, the very Bible that Tovia and Christians and Muslims are disputing here. It literally is the same word. And El sits at the head of the council called the assembled convocation. All right. And the other gods are called sons of El. Watch the overlap with the Bible when we get to it. Okay. You saw where we have with raised voice. Got it. Okay. Many scholars. We've got Frank Moorcross covers this, Canaanite myth and Hebrew epic, essays in the history of religion of Israel. You've got The Divine Council in Canaanite and Early Hebrew Literature by E. Theodore Mullen Jr. And you have The Early History of God. Everybody knows Mark S. Smith, Must Get, and of course, Patrick D. Miller participated with this as well. The Early History of God, Yahweh and the Other Deities in Ancient Israel, the Biblical Resource Series. So I just find it a bit ironic, personally, that if Rabbi thinks that what Christians teach based on a Trinity that comes out of, Greek philosophical yuck, and his later, monotheistic portrayal of what he's trying to interpret the biblical text is, his theology. I imagine what yuck this seems to be if you're reading Genesis through this lens and recognizing, oh, snap, what do we have here? Let's go to our Bible. Genesis 1, this is the text that she brings up. Then God said, let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and every creeping thing that's creeped upon the earth. So God created humans in his image, singular. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So some have argued that the male and female aspect, and if they're made to look like the gods, that's because the council wasn't just boys, but girls and boys. Some have argued that. Some just say maybe the idea in this Genesis 1 is that God isn't engendered, depending on when you want to try and date this Genesis 1. Some scholars have actually argued, and it's not a consensus view, that Genesis itself is later and has a lot in common with what you'd find in Hesiod's Theogony and, of course, Plato's Timaeus and Critias. So if that's the case, then they're already maybe molding it after this in some way, but they still are made in the image of, because even in Plato's Timaeus and Critias, the gods create humans out of clay, and they breathe wind, pneuma, they breathe spirit into them, bringing them to life. Athena, and I can't remember the other one if it's Prometheus in that particular story by Plato, but I know Athena plays an active role in creating humans, and I think Prometheus also plays a significant role in that specific example. There are many myths that cover the creation of man. But then here's where, personally, I think it helps you understand better what's going on with the plurality, because we know Genesis 1 through 11 carries plurality. Behold, right? We're talking verse 22. The Lord God said, see, the humans have become like one of us. Plural. The clay and the salt. What? But what were they doing in order to do this, right? Well, they ate from the fruit that they weren't supposed to. The serpent said that your eyes will be open. You'll become like the gods. Oh, yeah. Well, see, the humans have become like one of us, knowing good and evil, and now they might reach out their hands and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Now, there is so much textual criticism that you can go read. David Carr talks about different scholars who break up Genesis 1 and 2 and even within 2 and 3, and they see in these sections redactional potential, redactional insertions, plot holes that seem to be trying to be filled by later redactions, all sorts of stuff. Now, let's look at Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Plural. And I said, here am I, send me. And of course, God is sending a lying spirit to deceive people. God is literally doing that. I know a lot of people don't like to think their God is willing to like purposefully send lying spirits to deceive people, but it's in your Bible. So Isaiah 6, verse 8, you got to read that plurality there. A single deity is asking who will go for us. He's the king. He's the head honcho, and there's a council of them. But then you got to go to Psalm 82. Everybody should know about this one. God has taken his place in the divine council in the midst of the gods. Plural. He holds judgment. There are many gods. It's not just him. He's the chief. He's sitting at the kingly chair among the rest of them, but he is, of course, many gods. And I think this is just an important point to point out within the Hebrew Bible. One more is 1 Kings 22:19. That is, then Micah said, therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the hosts of heaven standing beside him to the right and to the left of him. So notice he's not alone. And that last one's 1 Kings. It's a council scene straight out of Ugarit, if you will. God on a throne, the heavenly host lined up, and God asks the assembly for a volunteer to go deceive a king. Job's chapter 1 and 2. We should pull that up. Job's chapter 1 and 2. So Job chapter 1, verse right here, 6. Job 1:6. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser also came among them. Notice, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser also among them. So there's a council of heavenly beings in this story. And then, of course, Job 2 repeats this idea. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And I think it's important also to look at stuff like Elephantine papyri and stuff. You could see Jews had this like polytheistic plurality. It wasn't just one God. Now, I agree with Rabbi Tovia Singer. Obviously, Genesis is not talking about the Trinity. Even Heiser said it's not talking about the Trinity, though. Christian apologists like Heiser were like, nah, it's not the Trinity. What else do we have? Deuteronomy 32. My goodness, this one's a big one. So I really wish I had this image I had that shows you the Dead Sea Scroll, the Septuagint versions and paralleling them. But what I've done is just shown you two English translations. The left is the NRSV, and it says, when the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the gods. And if you look at Deuteronomy 32:8 in King James Version, when the Most High divided, this is 1611, so divided, the U is a V, to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. So notice, number of the gods, number children of Israel, right? Well, the Masoretic text, which is something I think that Tovia would favor, will go with children of Israel rather than sons of God or numbers of the gods. In the Dead Sea Scroll material we have, it's gods. It's sons of gods. I believe there's a Septuagint translation that says angels, but it's not talking about the children of Israel. It's talking about divine ones. And of course, that's an important thing to pay attention to here when you're trying to get to the historical critical, what is the original text seemingly trying to teach. So when we found older copies, the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Greek translation, they both read it differently. They say God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God. The older reading has a divine council as well. One heavenly being assigned to each nation, with Israel as God's own portion. Later scribes found that too polytheistic and quietly swapped sons of God for sons of Israel. You could practically watch the theology get cleaned up in real time. And I think that's an important point. A textual critic, Emmanuel Tove, treats the Greek and the scrolls as real witnesses to an older Hebrew text exactly for cases like this. So Emmanuel Tove, recommend checking him out. Now, coming back to y'all. Just wanted to show you some sources. So at the beginning of the stream, and we're a little ways down, and I see the super chat. I'm going to get to you in just a second here, Bakken. Someone said, so allegedly Fred says, so who is right, Derek? You? Are you sure? Let's see. Just based on that one thing alone, it's not, look, I don't really have a pissing contest with my friend here, Rabbi Tovia Singer, but I think that the facts do line up with what I'm recommending. What he's doing is what I think Christians are doing in a different way. He's doing theology. He's finding poetic ways to interpret the material that I think rabbis have done for quite some time in trying to make sense of their theology with these older texts. And I'm just cutting through the fluff, I think, and saying, sorry, I'm looking at Ugarit. I'm looking at the Enuma Elish. I'm reading the critical scholars. I'm comparing it to other ancient creation myths. And I'm also seeing the plurality of a council with one god at the top, Marduk in the Enuma Elish. In the Ugarit tell, you have El. And it's the same name of the same chief deity that we find in the Bible for the name of God, El. And he is the granddaddy, if you will, sitting on the throne. So I'll let you be the judge of who you think is correct on this particular issue. That was the main one. I'm sure there's going to be a lot I agree with Rabbi on, but I'll be honest with you. I only watched up to that point, and then I was like, I got to react to this. I've got to react to this. So let me find the super chat here. I left someone hanging. Dude, good to see you, James. Good to see you, man. Rabbi Tovia is undebatable. I just think, yeah, a lot of Christian apologists I've reached out to have said, no, they're not interested. Myth Vision Podcast, your crew has some good ideas here. Thank you. I'm not sure what those ideas are, but I'll take them. Bakken, thank you for the super chat. Zoroaster introduced the spirit and monad. I think he's the model of high prophet for Moses, that the Avesta plays a big role in First Torah before Deuteronomy. I thought I was reading before, not reading like before Deuteronomy. So could be. I mean, when I don't even take Deuteronomy as like a single book either, right? I think that this is it's a messy compilation of material over time. But yeah, the Avesta, Zoroastrianism clearly seems to have inspired, I'm convinced, Zoroastrianism has inspired the narrative specifically in the Moses stories where we find the burning bush. You've seen, if you haven't, go check it out, the episode I did with Gad Barnea, where I think he's done convincing work showing the barefoot priests that stand in front of the eternal fire inside the temple. Well, what happens at the burning bush episode? You have Moses being told by the divinity, take your shoes off, you're standing on holy ground. There's actual iconography of barefoot priests who are standing in the presence on the holy ground with the burning eternal fire in the Persian myths. So, or in Persian ritual. So it's not myth, but they have their own myths as well. But in Persian practice, in their religion, in ritual, that's what they did. And here you have a story in the Bible that would put it likely in the Persian period when they wrote the narrative of Moses on this. You could try to argue earlier, but scholars like Gad, I think, have made a convincing job that this is probably Persian period. Now, Deuteronomy is not that narrative specifically, if I recall. I think this is in Exodus 7 or something, the burning bush scene. I could be wrong. One of those chapters in Exodus. But it wouldn't shock me if it's playing a role in Moses' narratives that it could be playing a role somewhere here. You could be 100% right. I don't know enough about it, Bakken. I'm not going to pretend I do. But it is interesting. I was kind of blown away when Gad brought up how far back Persian philosophical thought about God was, and that it had many, like there's one divinity, but many, I can't remember the particular word, where emanations, I think was the term that was used, that the God could have many emanations and yet still be the one God. And that's where I think when you start having one God that can be in many locales at once or many emanations at the same time, you're opening up the door for plurality in unity and start giving opportunity for people to develop a theology that could be called Trinity. So seems like the invisible glue that you can use in theology when you're reading text to come up with theology like the Trinity. Let us make man, us, and then singular, many and one. Oh, see, Trinity. Yeah, I see what Rabbi's pushing back against, but I see plural and I see humans made in the image as they're made to look like. And I would encourage people to check out Somer's book, and even Hamori. Esther J. Hamori wrote a book on the divine images of gods and humans being made to look like the gods and stuff. But then also the latest, greatest, if you haven't read it, of course, God and Anatomy, which covers a lot of this material from the ancient Near Eastern context. So if you take those three books, I think is it Daniel Somer? Hold on. A&E Scholar, Somer, God's Body. Let me make sure I got this right. Benjamin, I was going to say Daniel. I don't know why. Benjamin D. Somer, God's Bodies in the Hebrew Bible, I believe. Let's see. He did an interview. I got to get this guy on. What am I doing? What am I doing, ladies and gentlemen? Where's his book at Amazon? Here's the book. The Bodies of God and the World of Ancient Israel. I did a video a while back covering this book and Esther J. Hamori's, along with, am I writing that right? Let me just do this. God's Body. Let's just make that easy. I did do an interview with her, but she didn't want to do one on God's Body because she wrote the book 20 years ago. Here we go. When Gods Were Men, the Embodied God in Biblical and Near Eastern Literature. I believe this is the book specifically. Yes. Yep. All right. And then notice my interview with her on the idea of God's monsters. That was a fascinating interview. Anyway, worth checking out. Figure I'd shamelessly plug. All right. We got another super duper in the house. I'm going back down here. All right. Arinu, forgive me if I butchered your name there. Waraq ibn Nafal, Nestorian Christian who rejected Christ's divinity, gave Muhammad his entire prophetic framework after Hira. Coincidence? This reminds me of a scholar that I interviewed. I haven't read his books, Waraq ibn Nafal. I have a couple of them back here, and I haven't had time to. That's AJ Droge. Trying to see. I've got a couple books back here. I know I have this guy's books. I've seen this name, and I have like 2 or 3 of his books about Islam, but I never read them yet. I need to. And so the interview that I was looking for, let me do this. We're going to go to playlists. We're going to go to my Islam. So for those who think I don't do anything critical of Islam ever, or, do like research, Islamic history, you're mistaken. I have an entire playlist of 24 episodes that I've done. Now, why do I do Christianity more? Because I was a Christian. It's pretty easy to, do something that you're familiar with more than anything else. But I have become fascinated learning about it. So the interview that I recommend that talks about what you're talking about, Nestorian Christianity, was the one I did. Oh, golly, I wish I put all their faces on the screens. That's Shadi Nasser. Javad Hashmi, Reuven Firestone, Professor Reuven Firestone, The Emergence of Islam. This Peter von Sievers. So this is the episode, and he goes into Nestorian Christianity, or not just Nestorian, but like ultimately what he talks about is that Christians have been arguing for 700 years about if the Trinity is true, then God died on the cross. Deicide and other theological problems that were disputed and engaged that were still going on into the 7th century, and that these debates found their way into Arabia, and that there was obviously a brand of people who were followers of Jesus to some extent. They clearly were not fans of what you would find in Constantinople, but they had a brand of Christianity that was saying no to the divinity of Jesus. God cannot die. And you could possibly read into that why they would not have him become crucified, that God preserved him. I don't know. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? But if you're curious, you have 2 hours and 3 minutes. This scholar, I believe he's a German scholar. I could be wrong. I hope he didn't take offense to that. If he watches this at any point, I doubt he will. He's probably in some book right now translating something or whatever. I'm going to put it in the chat. Plus, I have a playlist in case anybody's ever interested in going and watching my Islamic stuff. I have a lot of material that I've done on that so far, and I plan on doing more. Now, I started a series, though, that is talking about the human origins of the Quran, but I didn't add it to this playlist. This playlist is specifically historical interviews and academic kind of research stuff. I started one on the human origins where I've already dealt with the sleepers of the cave, where I show you that is, in my opinion, no doubt recycled hagiography. I mean, the older sleepers of Ephesus version gets recycled down into the Quran, and it's pretty telling. I mean, a simple giveaway is that the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf talks about, are there 3, are there 5, are there 7? Only Allah knows. Allah's dictating this. Supposedly, according to many Muslims who understand the Quran as a dictation by Allah through Gabriel to Muhammad, wouldn't he have just said the number? Like, God doesn't need to give you 3 possible answers. He knows. It says only Allah knows. Well, Allah is the one dictating it, but there's a lot of stuff going on because there were variations of this legend where there were different number people. There wasn't just 7. There were different numbers of people sleeping in the caves. So anyway, I definitely would like to read more of Warraq Ibn Nafal just to hear what he has to say. I don't know if he's an actual scholar, but might be a Muslim or ex-Muslim. I can't remember off the top of my head. But is it a coincidence? It could be. Remember now, there's debates going on all over the place about this stuff. I don't know what to do with it. It's an interesting thing to think about. Thank you for recognizing that. Ya Madi, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Yeah. Really appreciate that support. And then Andrew James Burns with a 5. Thank you for the super chat. Really, really do appreciate that. Yaya Madi, thank you. You said, hey, brother, love your work. You have to get Dr. Ali Attai on your show. He explains an Islamic historical view of Jesus. It would be nice. Love your work. And then there's a heart. I'm not sure what RY means, but thank you. Dr. Ali Attai. Let me get this person. Dr. Ali Attai. By the way, if you're looking like for an Islamic scholar that I've had let me go back to my list here. Here's Dr. Ali Attai, by the way. I'm going to reach out and see what he has to offer. Do a little background check him out, see what he's got going on. And I'll go from there. But the one of the scholars that's a Muslim that I've actually talked to several times, and I don't know if they're all on here. Where's he at? Javad Hashmi. So Javad T. Hashmi from Harvard University. I've enjoyed my interviews with him. He's a Muslim scholar who does historical critical work. And I like him a lot because he's willing to point out some of the obvious things I'm recognizing within the Quran, that, hey, there's legend, there's folklore, there's things like that. And that's important to me, that more people become like that and not be so fundamentalist to me. Someone said Dr. Ali Attai is a gem. I'll look into him. Thank you for the recommendation. I really do appreciate it. I haven't come across him before, so I will definitely do some research and see what he has to say, specifically in regards to an Islamic historical view of Jesus. So that will be interesting. I can't imagine it'd be too far off from what maybe some Jews thought at the time, because there is a lot of rabbinic stuff, I think, that influences what we find in Islam, or at least overlaps with it. And not all Jews probably had the same vitriol towards Jesus, but Jews didn't have the same magical view about Jesus and the Trinity and all that. I very much doubt they were accepting of the theology we find within most Christian circles of the time. Maybe in some kind of Syriac versions of Christianity or stuff that's down in Arabia that wasn't necessarily at the heart of Constantinople, but it'd be interesting to see. So let's go a little further with my friend here, Rabbi Tovia Singer and Cora. And am I pronouncing her name properly? I really hate to butcher anyone's name. I'm the worst at it, though. I confess up front. I am the worst at names, pronouncing stuff. I mean, I was saying Cambridge forever. Come to find out it's Cambridge. I'm like, oh, I've been doing this for 8 years saying Cambridge? Good job, Derek. So forgive me in advance if I butcher your name. Let us go a little further. I've not reviewed past this point.
Another passage that I was really curious about is the passage where it talks about the Lord on the earth and the Lord in the heavens. I believe it's Genesis 19:24, I believe. Christians use this passage to try and say that we have the Lord on earth and we have the Lord in the heaven. How exactly do we reconcile this while simultaneously being monotheists? And they obviously posit the doctrine of the Trinity. How exactly would you reconcile this?
Where do you see in Genesis 19 the the Lord of the heavens, the Lord of the earth. Where do you see that even?
Let me.
Let's attack that passage.
All right.
I think I have an idea, but that term does
what
not.
They try to say is
so
it reads
attack it correctly.
All right. It reads, "Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens." So what they
dude, that just sounds like when your King James Bible in English and you're reading the King James and the Lord said, and then the Lord did, and the Lord, it's like old. It just all this is just old style writing. So the Christians are trying to make this a Trinity thing, or like plurality, like two Yahwehs here, two Lords here. I don't know. It just sounds to me like a you know how you have like Hebrew doublet type stuff, or what is it, Hebrew parallelism kind of thing. You could bring that in, but it's just the Lord doing the deed and it's repeating it. It seems like just old phraseology.
Try to say with this is they try to again invoke this idea of plurality and say that this Lord here, it's going to be referring, there was obviously the Lord that was raining down the burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they try to invoke plurality here.
The reason is, and this again is such a tragedy for Christians, is they don't read Hebrew. I served as rabbi of Indonesia for 5 years.
So he's got an arrow right here to the grammar. Mind you, all of these dots were medieval, like these are medieval innovation. So this is not like originally in the text.
So many friends who were Muslims, and every one of them had a Quran in their home that was in Arabic, every one of them. And I remember during Muslim holy days where young Muslim children recited the Quran by heart, and how everyone was so proud of them in Arabic, not in Indonesian, not another language. And tragically, there are thousands of schools, Christian schools in the United States, and none of them teach their children the Hebrew language, which they believe is the language which God imparted to the prophets, which is mind-blowing. So as it turns out, when we look at the text in Hebrew, there's a unambiguous esnachto. So the text actually would read, "And God rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire." There's an esnachto there, which would be the equivalent of a semicolon, okay? And then so it's a stop. Mi'es Hashem min hashemayim. It's from God, from heaven. So what they've done is they've just removed the semicolons right there. It's called an esnachto. And they don't even know they're removing it. And Christians are not bad people. They're taught this in school. But the question is,
my only critique is the older Hebrew doesn't have the grammar there, so Christians aren't removing it. I just think that what they're doing is they're reading their theology back into a text that already has multiple lords as one. Though they're using Trinitarian theology and looking and hunting to try and find something like that. I would just say that the Hebrew is just an old style of saying the Lord did this and the Lord did this. It's the same guy. It's the same God. It's the same, but they want to divide the persons and stuff, whoever might be making this argument. I'm not sure. So I agree with Rabbi here. I think the Masoretes at least recognize grammatically later, hey, let's insert some of this stuff here because the older reading, let's make it make sense. I don't think the Christians are playing around with that text in terms of the grammar, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what Tovia is saying here. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense here, but yeah, it's not multiple lords, like a different Lord. And I know Christians will go, that's a straw man too, because we're not saying it's multiple lords, but it's different persons. Like it doesn't say that in the text either. It's just an older text in Hebrew that clearly is talking about the same one God that's doing it.
Why does God repeat it here? Because now, for Americans or English speakers, this is a little weird. Like, why is there repeating that this comes from God? Why the emphasis? And the answer is very simple, is that early on in the chapter, we see it's not clear who is going to destroy Sodom. If you look at the conversation, as an example, between the angels and Lot's family, you'll see that Lot was alerting his sons-in-law that they're going to destroy Sodom. Lot is saying, I can't go anymore. He wasn't a young man. don't destroy Sodom just yet. So he's saying to the angels that they're going to destroy Sodom. Yet we find this emphasize that you need to know this is not like an angel just doing this. Yes, God used an angel as a messenger. And that's what we believe, that an angel is a malach, he's a messenger. Angels.
That's actually an interesting reading of what he's saying. Genesis 19. Let me pull this up here. Let's just get the whole chapter up in front of us. Genesis 19. We've all read this before, but let's go together. I'm going to do the NRSV. Obviously, I don't know the Hebrew, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But let's read it together. Genesis 19. Here we go. So 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. We know this. So it's angels here. So is it emphasizing, because angels play a role in the story specifically, that it wants to make sure you know it's the Lord that did it? I mean, that seems to be at least what Rabbi is saying here makes sense. Let's see, 20. I think he said, and Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, your servant has found favor with you. Look, that city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to him, "Very well, I grant you this favor too. I will not overthrow the city which you have spoken." Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. I mean, I don't see why Christians would make much out of that. Just Lord being repeated twice. Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. I know it sounds weird when you read it like that, but it just seems like an old style of writing. It doesn't seem like 2 different lords here or 2 different persons playing a role in that. Yeah. I could see that as like inner conflict vibe without says. Yeah. I mean, at least I can understand what Rabbi is saying there. Maybe it's just an old style of Hebrew, but either way, I think the takeaway is that the Trinity doesn't seem to be what's going on there.
Do what God requires of them, Gabriel, Michael, and so on. So therefore, the Torah goes out of its way to say, ladies and gentlemen, understand this very much. This was not an angelic endeavor, but this really is from Hashem. And you know what's striking is that if you go to the Dead Sea area, which is only about 40 miles from where I live, you could smell the sulfur to this day. You could smell it. It's all in the air. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing the way he puts that. Like, you can still smell the sulfur to this day. And I'm probably playing games here with Tovia's wording, but like, he's probably, I don't know if he means this. It sounds like he could be saying, well, since the Sodom and Gomorrah destruction, we still smell that sulfur. Or is he just saying, if you go to the geographic location, which people who actually study this land know that sulfur's in the region. In fact, when you read, there's an interesting book, coming back to me for a second, interesting book by Robert Cargill, Cities That Built the Bible. He points out how a lot of the stories of the Bible are based off geographic environments and locations that craft the narrative. They knew sulfur. They knew no life was in the sea. Like, the stories in the Bible are reflections of the geography often. So they knew sulfur was flammable. They weren't idiots. They weren't cavemen without any technology. They knew how to start fires, and they understood sulfur catches fire. Maybe a natural disaster of some sort took place in a locale near the Dead Sea where sulfur is there. Maybe. I'm just saying that could spurn the story we later have as Sodom and Gomorrah. But definite worth reading. Just sounded like Tovia was acting like and I'm maybe reading into this, like, what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? We can still smell in the air today through that sulfur. Look, the geography has sulfur, period. You go to the land, you're going to find sulfur there. So what? Stories can form around that. You know what I mean? Just like if you're reading the Odyssey and the Iliad, you're going to find out
and I'm going to show you a map. I can't wait to watch the movie next month. I'm a big fan of Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, even if it isn't historically to a T correct. Odyssey, Homer, journey map. There's a pretty one online. I'm going to actually just snag this, and then I'm going to share my screen. Ooh, that one's a little bit small, though. Oh, well. All right. Oh, well. I'll pull it out anyway. Let me share my screen with this real quick. So if you actually go and read the Odyssey, have a classicist help take you on the journey, you're going to find out this is Odysseus's 10-year journey home after the war. When you read the Trojan War that happens in the Iliad, the Odyssey is going to start with Odysseus wrapping things up with the war in Troy and heading home, right? So Troy's on the far right. 1. Then you got 2, 3, 4. You can see the number system where he goes in order. In the stories, often you'll have geographic evidence, if you will, within the narratives that gives you verisimilitude. It makes you think, holy crap, there's some real stuff from that region that's mentioned in the story that makes sense of that geography. Well, yeah, when you're crafting a story, you try to make it as real as possible, even if it is an epic or a fiction. In the ancient world, often that's the case. So you have a story that is wrapped around a geography. And that's the analogy I would like to give, especially since I'm looking forward to this epic next month. And by the way, I'm doing a video on the Odyssey in the Bible, hoping that it catches a wave when Christopher Nolan's movie comes out, because I think most people who are watching that movie are not going to have a clue how much inspiration the Odyssey itself has had on biblical stories they've read 100 times. I'm just saying. All right, let me close this out. Now, where are we at? Nope, not live with Toby. I will have him on at some point. Take the ride. Good to see you. We'll see if that film is good. I think it's going to be great. I think if people are too picky about characters not matching the historical vibes and all that, I get it. Clearly you can be critical. There's nothing wrong with that. I think just for the entertainment and the value of how great the film, the footage is going to be, hopefully covers it better than prior films have been on the Odyssey. I think it will. We're talking about top-notch quality footage, right? So I think we're playing games, getting caught up in the drama against what's going to happen in Christopher Nolan's footage. Yes, if you're looking for an absolute historical reconstruction of what literally they wore, how they literally look, you're gonna walk away pissed off. But I'm more interested in just the story itself and how well that plays out for me. That's true, allegedly, Fred. 100%. All right, back to Tovia. I got a little bit more time here, and we could pick this up. Look, if you like what we're doing here, and we want to continue this into like a part 2, we can. My wife will be back shortly from taking my mother-in-law to the airport, and she's having to, say farewell for now. We're hoping to go visit her and spend some more time with her due to her stage 4 cancer, and we're only 12 minutes into an hour and 18-minute video, so I'm hoping this has been somewhat educational.
It's I think the lowest point on Earth.
It is. And
it was, going back about 4,000 years ago, it was a place of enormous vegetation, and today nothing grows there. So that's why.
Huh. So that seems like he's saying like all this land around the Dead Sea was all vegetation, and then Sodom and Gomorrah happened and there's no more vegetation. That I really would want to check with like a geologist, and like I very much doubt that was the case. I'm not going to say there aren't oases, because we did travel to the Ein Gedi, I believe it's called. I'm not sure how you spell that. Ein Gedi. Let me do this. Allow Ein Gedi. Israel. Let me do this. Dead Sea Ein Gedi. Ein Gedi. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Okay, here we are. So You can go today and see this for yourself. And I've actually jumped in the water here. I literally was standing in this spot. There's an oasis right there near the Dead Sea. Ein Gedi, I believe it's called, is how you pronounce it, which we actually went to. I have footage of it. I have never edited yet. And waterfall inside. There's a waterfall at the end. I climbed up in there and they started looking at me funny. But yeah, you'll find there's like little oases here and there. But dude, it is dead. And to say in passing, it's like saying the whole earth was flooded 5,000 years ago when Noah, almost sounds like he believes that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is that prior to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, pretty much all around the Dead Sea looked like Ein Gedi. That's what it sounded like to me. You tell me if you think I'm wrong. I mean, I'm trying to still man my friend here, but I think that would be a mistake if he's saying that. Let us continue.
Why it's repeated? They're simply ignoring the S nach the semicolon. That's all.
That's very interesting. As you said, obviously Christians, they're not necessarily bad people inherently. They're obviously taught with these misunderstandings of the Hebrew Bible, which is really unfortunate. Another passage that I was really curious on, I wrote it down, is so Christians, not only do they argue Trinity from the Old Testament using passages like these with regards to plurality or repetition when it talks about God, the Lord.
Might I add, I don't know if Cora does this, but I would be shocked that Muslims look into the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, and they think they see Muhammad as well. So sure, Christians are butchering and putting into the text who's not there. Jesus is prophesied here and there and here and there. But so do Muslims. They see Muhammad in the Old Testament where he isn't, where they're reading that into the text. So everybody's guilty here. Everybody is guilty. Jews, Christians, and Muslims. We're all guilty. Let's be honest.
But they also argue using what we see in the Hebrew Bible as the angel of the Lord. So how exactly would you go about responding to a Christian who says that the angel of the Lord is God because of the actions the actions that the angel of the Lord does, as well as the names or titleage that is given to the angel of the Lord?
Oh my God, this is such a huge question. Holy freaking smokes. I want to hear Tovia. Love you, Tovia. You know that. It's a huge question because I got a video coming soon where I actually get into this very interesting development in Enochian literature, in late Second Temple Judaism literature, in Metatron, Enoch, two powers in heaven. Like there's some stuff in Judaism that this isn't a Christian innovation, that there were multiple powers in heaven. Jewish thought, not all, but Jewish thought already had this as well. So let's see what Toby has to say. I've said enough.
Right. So this is a something that really is a very good question, because there's something unconventional going on in the Hebrew Bible. And that is, those who represent God are called God in Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible. Now, if you, the viewers, don't know this, it's unfortunate. It's because you were never taught biblical Hebrew. That's not part of your upbringing. But as it turns out, even Jerusalem in Jeremiah 33 is called God. It literally says that Jerusalem be called the Lord is our righteousness. That does not mean, heaven forbid, that we should worship Jerusalem. Oh no, this Jerusalem is a place that reflects God. We would see in Judges chapter 2, verse 1, where it literally says, an angel of the Lord said this, and then I took you out of Egypt. Moses, of blessed memory, our teacher.
Oh, there's an interesting article called A Strange Biography of Samson, which gets into the whole Judges, but also specifically the Nazirite vow, the Nazirite birth, if you will, of let me get you the PDF link. It's free. Huh. Okay, did it download it just now? I just clicked the link. Let's go to researchgate.com, .net, and it's going to verify if you're a human if you want it. I'm just going to do this. You need Yair Zokovich. You're going to need to probably just go and find the downloadable version for free, because I don't know if I could send that downloadable version here in the chat. Definitely get this. I put it linked it in the chat. It covers the angel of the Lord and why this scholar specifically, Yair Zokovich, says that this is actually a redactor. The angel of the Lord acts as God, and what he's doing is distancing God from the angel, the representation of God as an angel form on earth, because this story, prior to its redaction, whoever edited it, had God sleeping with Samson's mother. So pagan sexual birth myths, God was impregnating Samson's mom. And Josephus picked up on this when he did. I did a documentary on this already. Like, I've done too many documentaries. There's too much. If you really, really, really want to know this stuff and get into it, dig into the sources, see what the scholars say. But Josephus could read in the Hebrew that the husband of, and she's never named, Samson's mother is never named. That's the Hebrew Bible for you often. There's occasional woman names dropped, but her name's never named. The husband is, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But Josephus can recognize that he's jealous that she's meeting with this angel of the Lord in private in the field. There's also a law that talks about if a woman is, I can't say the word on YouTube for monetization reasons, if she is forcefully abused, I'll put it that way, in a sexual sense, then she, isn't guilty and she's innocent. If it's out in a field, something happens, whatever, there's laws like that. So there's hints that get covered like this by this scholar Yair Zokovich within the Hebrew Bible, but also it looks like the angel of the Lord gets put in place of God here, and it seems like it might be a redactional thing. I don't know why I felt like telling you guys all this, but it's information I picked up over the years. I have a documentary on Samson. Just look up Myth Vision, Samson. I don't know. I think I called it like The Origins of Samson Will Blow Your Mind or something crazy.
One of the greatest men who ever lived and our chief prophet, literally in a conversation with God where he's very reluctant to.
Yes, Fred. Samson was a demigod. Technically, Yair Zokovich is saying yes. That is what ultimately is it. The things you don't know until you do. Yeah. And he goes further. I'll come to me for a second. Since Anan says, tell us more. Okay. Let me give you a fun book. It's old. It's outdated. But so what? It's a blast from the past. Paul Karras. Okay. This book, The Story of Samson, its place in the religious development of mankind. What a heck of a fun, easy, small read. I mean, he even sees Odin parallels. Like, not that he's saying one borrowed from the other, but the fact that Samson's eye, he thinks it's an individual eye. I think it's both eyes, but either way, he thinks when Samson's hair gets cut off and he loses his power and they take out his eye, he sees a parallel to Odin, who takes out his eye and puts it into the well. So he's a one-eyed figure. But anyway, this one's a blast, but the Yair Zokovich is like the cutting edge, latest, greatest. And Yair finds this demigod birth narrative motif in other barren women stories that we find in Genesis. Even with Eve, the same book I pointed out earlier, Francesca Stavrakopoulou points out in this book that in Hebrew, it can be read that Yahweh impregnated Eve. Not Adam, but Yahweh impregnated Eve. And so, taken in a literal way, he opened her womb. Now, if we said on the street, like, hey, I opened her bosom and impregnated her, you would think, okay, you inseminated her, you made her pregnant. Many of the stories in the Hebrew Bible have miraculous births because the women can't have babies. They're barren. He covers this in that article that I sent. Yair, Yair Zokovich. God knows that's a hell of a name to try and let me just spell it for you. I'm going to copy and paste it to make sure everybody knows. Check him out. Okay, that's the name. Look it up. It's a blast of an article. There's also some articles from 1970s and 80s worth reading on Samson, paralleling him with Heracles. Even the ideas of bees play a role in the story of both Samson and like the honeycomb inside of the lion's corpse that you see. That there's overlap with Hercules, but then also you have Melkart lying in the background, which in this older stuff, Melkart plays a bigger role. This is from 1919. This was back when they didn't even know how to properly pronounce Gilgamesh. A philologist eventually stopped calling him Idzudbar. I kid you not. His name, it's like Idzubar, not Gilgamesh. They called him Idzubar. And I think philologists started getting the name right. They're like, hold on, Idzubar. No, it's Gilgamesh. It reminds me of a friend of mine's brother. His name was Charles, and his brother had speech impediment. Growing up, he didn't know how to say words properly. He eventually got that fixed, and people helped him with it. But he would call his brother, his name's Charles, Dawa. Anyway, I don't know why it reminds me of that. So the Strange Biography of Samson article, go get it. It covers all of this in great depth. He knows the Hebrew. By the way, he's in Israel. I believe this guy, Jewish studies, I believe he is located in Israel. Strange Biography of Samson. Go download this bad boy. This was really interesting. Great information. It's not a super duper long read. It's easy. It's free online. Go watch. Go check it out. All right. Lots of cool stuff. Back to my friend, Rabbi Tovia Singer. Here we go.
To carry out what God wants. Moses was a person of enormous greatness. He was just deeply humble. And he kept explaining to God that really I'm not worthy of the task. He explains to God that, look, I've got a speech impediment because when he was a little baby, he burnt his tongue when he put coal on his mouth. And God said to him, and this is Exodus chapter 7, verse 1. There's nothing even more transparent than this. Literally, God said to Moses, you read Exodus 7, verse 1, literally, God, the Almighty, says to Moses that you will be an Elohim, which means God to Pharaoh, and Aaron, or Aharon, will be your prophet openly, which, by the way, upends the whole idea that the name Elohim conveys a plurality. Was there more than one Moses? So therefore, there is a chasm here. And my heart goes out to Christians because I want them to know about that there's only one God. And that is, you and I, Cora, we would never talk this way. We would only call the only God created the heavens and the earth, the merciful one. We would only call him God, and we would never. But in Tanakh, this is not the convention. And in fact, we're told in the book of Exodus that God is sending a malach, an angel of the Lord ahead of you, and do not rebel against him because my name is in him and he cannot forgive your sin. That blows the whole thing away. Moreover, Christians love to quote Hebrews when it helps them, when it assists them. They quote this anonymous point. You made a great point of this in your debate, which I thought was brilliant. When you asked your opponent, who wrote the book of Hebrews, you're quoting the book of Hebrews as though this is something reliable. You don't even know who wrote it. And that was totally dodged because Hebrews is written anonymously and everyone knows that it was not written by Paul. But they quote it and consider it part of the canon, the 27 books of the New Testament. Well, Hebrews chapter 1 begins by saying that Jesus is not an angel. To what angel, whoever wrote the book of Hebrews, we don't know, it's very fine Greek, says that to who else was it said that you should be at the side of God? So therefore, the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, from beginning to end, argues that Jesus is above the angels and he's not an angel. It will argue that Jesus is above Moses, God forbid, above Joshua, Yehoshua ben Nun. He's our Sabbath. He's our high priest. The book of Hebrews argues all this. It's a 13-chapter argument against Judaism. So your own Christian Bible says that Jesus is not an angel. So why are you arguing this? With your permission, I want to add this point. Why are they arguing this? We know We know the reason. The reason is because Jesus, Son of God, the Christian Jesus, does not appear anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. So if we would walk into a church, and neither of us would ever do that, but theoretically, if we did, all we would hear is Jesus from the minute you walk in to the minute you walk out. You'd hear Jesus more than God in most churches. So the question is, where is this explicit mention of the Christian Jesus? The answer is it's not there. So therefore, why is it not in the Hebrew Bible? The angel of the Lord, whenever it appears. Now, there were many Christian church fathers who reject this. Augustine, the most revered church father, bishop of 4th and 5th century, utterly rejects the notion that...
Did he say 14th, 15th century or 4th, 5th century? I'm not really sure, but I think he meant 4th, 5th century. I got to give him that because he probably just... It sounded like 14, 15, but I think he just made a little minor boo-boo there. Let's let him wrap up what he has to say real quick.
Jesus was an angel. But nevertheless, there were church fathers who did. But we don't care about the church fathers. We care about Scripture.
Okay, so let's see if Cora has anything to add to that or if it's a new question.
Absolutely, and that was a beautiful response. What's interesting is the point with the book of Hebrews, and you did point out that I used...
And now they're moving to Hebrews, but the question was Exodus 7:1. I think that's a great passage. 100%, I think it's an interesting point that Rabbi's bringing in here. Moses being called God to Pharaoh obviously does not make Moses divine. But I do think his agency explanation for the angel of the Lord is the rabbinic answer, not the historical one. In stories like Genesis 16, Exodus 3, at the burning bush, for example, or Judges 6 and 13, the angel of the Lord and the Lord blur into the same character in the same scene. And so this is why I want to, like my video that's coming up that talks about Metatron and Enoch. Enoch is like narrating all these things, right? In a lot of one Enoch that you read, but you get in the second and third Enoch, you start finding out some more interesting stuff. Enoch ends up being revealed that he is the Son of Man, that he will judge the nations, that his flesh melts off and he's pure divine light. And there's also another rabbinic source where this guy gets, his name's not allowed to be mentioned in rabbinic sources. And I covered this in a video coming up where he sees someone sitting on a throne next to God's throne. It's not Jesus. This is in rabbinic sources, and that he's not supposed to tell people. This is unlawful. This is all in like Jewish sources. So it's pretty mind-boggling when you see some of this stuff. So the angel of the Lord and the Lord get mixed up often because you're dealing with redactional, editorial stuff. So when you read the story or the books as one text that the same author wrote, that's when you have to harmonize and make sense of it through a lens of a Christian, Jew, or I don't know if Muslims have to do that within the Bible. It seems like some do, others, I don't know. I don't know how strict Muslims have to be about the Hebrew Bible text. Seems like they can play fast and loose with it if it works for them or not. That's my opinion, okay? Could be wrong. Be curious to hear what actual Muslims say about that. Be happy to discuss this with Muslims. So if any Muslim might come across this video and say, nope, let me explain. The other thing I have at the end of the day, it need to be someone influential, because there's a million, for every Muslim, there's a different opinion about things, right? Oh, I'm a Quran onlyist, or I'm this, or I'm that. I'd like someone who seems to be somewhat authoritative among Muslims online, or at least carries some reputation where many people do take them serious, because you can get anyone. I can get a Muslim tomorrow who comes on and says, no, I think there's a ton of legend and myth in the Quran. Now, they're Harvard professors and they are practicing Muslims, but you see what I'm saying. So I'd be curious to know how they negotiate with the Hebrew Bible, and why, if these texts have been so butchered, still rely on it, claiming that it prophesies your prophet. You know what I mean? How do you know that that passage isn't tampered with? These are questions I have. I have all sorts of questions. Who doesn't? Little Angel of Joy says usually they pick whatever confirms their own scriptures, at least based on my experience. Well, that was my concern when I was reviewing, just for fun. I was having fun reviewing Michael Jones, God Logic, and I can't remember the other girl's name. and 3 Muslims that were going back and forth over does Jesus teach the Trinity in the New Testament, which I think that's a ridiculous topic to argue over. I don't think the Christians could ever achieve that kind of argument. Even if they were able to get to that place, I don't think they'd have been able to really nail down that conclusion. But in that, I wanted to watch. And at first I'm like, yo, the Muslims they got some points here. They're at least, but then it was like, they brought in some like presuppositions they have about their faith and their conclusions about the Quran. And that's when I felt like, okay, hold on. The tides are starting to shift a bit. Seems like they need a portrayal of what they think from the 7th century through the Quran. That's the proper historical lens by which we would understand Jesus through. And they weren't really clear about their sources or what their method was for knowing what the historical Jesus was or what he said or, all of that. It just seemed a little bit odd. Okay, let's go just a smidget further, just a smidget, because we got to get just a little bit longer, and then I'm going to go eat and spend some time with the wife because we've had a long weekend. All right.
In the debate, as well as the point that you made with Exodus 7:1 and the understanding that Elohim, because Christians also hinge upon the fact that Elohim entails some sort of plurality. I made that exact point that you made with regards to Moses. When God says that he is going to make Moses an Elohim over Pharaoh, Moses is obviously a singular person. So that shows that the only way that you can interpret that the God of the Hebrew Bible is multi-personal is if you purposefully try to read a Trinitarian framework into the Hebrew Bible,
of course,
which is obviously disingenuous, right?
Or you could confuse what seems to be polytheistic material, which I think is older and is still a fossil in the Hebrew Bible, with look, wouldn't Korah think the Trinity is polytheism? I imagine she doesn't accept that as monotheism, even though granting that Christians are not trying to say we're polytheist, philosophically speaking, I had imagined Korah would call Trinitarianism polytheism. Well, if the Old Testament has polytheistic tendencies, or at least if it's not polytheism, it's some form of, monolatry with various divinities in this council, you can see why it's easy to fall prey and look in there and go, hey, I see a Trinity. So if Korah saw my interpretation today, let's say saw my interview or my reaction and said, oh, you think it's a divine council. Oh, you have other ancient Near Eastern evidence to support the idea, contrary to your friend Tovia's interpretation in Genesis and elsewhere. Wow. Okay. Now it makes a lot of sense why Christians would see plurality, and then they retrofit their Trinitarianism back into a polytheistic framework. But would that be something Korah would accept? I don't know.
You should be reading a text for what it's trying to say, not for what you're trying to make it say.
I agree with that. That's why I'm willing to say I think Muslims, Jews, and Christians are all guilty of having those issues. And who knows? I may be guilty of some blind spots and biases and whatever, but I am trying the best I can to look at the text in the historical context and think, yeah, but how would that have functioned? And if I look at the neighboring towns that are there that we have archaeological evidence of, and they have a council with many gods, with a chief god at the top, and then you see this in Marduk, right, in the Enuma Elish. I'm trying to be as consistent and fair as I can and allow the experts to speak without a religious bias pausing me from drawing a conclusion.
Right.
And another point that you made at the end, which it kind of intros into what I was going to ask you about furthermore going on, which is whether or not Jesus, the Christian conception of Jesus, is found in the Hebrew Bible. We see a lot of Christians try to argue that their conception of Jesus, the dying and rising God for the sins of mankind, is...
Notice their conception. I just want to point out the vocabulary here. The conception Jews would have about Jesus, Muslims have about Jesus, because they do have a very high view of Jesus. He's born of a virgin. As a child, he was able to turn clay birds into living birds, all this stuff. And then Christians, of course, have the highest level of Jesus where he is God, depending on the Christian. I mean, there's various Christians, but you know what I mean. I just think that's interesting how she phrases it. But then again, she's coming from a religious background.
found within the Hebrew Bible. And I wanted to know your interpretation on a couple of the passages that they use to prove such a claim. And the first one is the famous one that they try to use, which is the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. How would you combat a Christian who says that the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 is Jesus?
Right. So what I've done, you watch my YouTube channel, is that I'm on the street and sometimes challenged by Christians, and Isaiah 53 comes up, and they know it by heart. They can just rattle off by heart. And I ask them, tell me, what does it say in Isaiah 52? And there's like a blank look. What does it say in Isaiah 54? They say, I have to look it up. And I said, well, that's strange. You knew 53 by heart, but you have no clue what's going on in 52 or 54. They have no clue what's going on in Isaiah except for 3 chapters, 7, 9, and 53. So what's happening is they're reading the chapter out of context. Christians always are reading passages out of context. So that's the fourth of 4 servant songs, which begin in Isaiah 41. For the viewers, Isaiah 41, verse 8 and 9. The servant is Israel, not all of Israel, just a remnant, a faithful remnant of Israel. Okay, Isaiah 43, verse 10. Gosh, if Christians would just read this verse, you are my witnesses, declares the Lord, my servant, singular, whom I have chosen. You should know and believe and understand that I am God. Before me, no God was formed, neither was there one after me. That gets rid of the idea of the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and the generating of the Son. I am the Lord. Besides me, there is no Savior. I wish those words were heard in the Vatican. I wish Dallas Theological Seminary, those words would echo. Again, 44 verse 1, 44 21, 45 4, 48 20, 49 3. I can keep going. The servant is the remnant of Israel. Now one caution is very important. Isaiah does not read anything like Joshua. More than 90% of it is poetry, which means that it can't be read out of context because with the exception of 5 chapters out of 66, it's all poetry. It's very, very difficult. So therefore, if Isaiah is very vulnerable to manipulation because he's using imagery as an example, he's speaking about a nation or a remnant of a nation, and the singers, though, speaking about one person. Now, in 53:8, the passage actually ends, which slips into the plural. Mipesha ami negalamo in Hebrew, for the transgressions of my people, they were stricken. And the Christian Bibles all hide that. So you see Isaiah, because it's poetry. So what happens is Isaiah is telling us that the servant is Israel, but you'd have to read it in context. Like you would know as a Muslim very well that Abraham, God calls him my friend, which is mind-blowing. I mean, Abraham, our father, Cora, our father, what a man. So no, who else does God call my friend? Well, that's where it comes from tonight. That's Isaiah 41, verse 8. I mean, I feel the chills right now. So that's Abraham, who's buried just a half hour from where I live. So all you have to do is read in context. Now, who is speaking in Isaiah 53? Who's talking? They have no clue. So who's speaking in Isaiah 53, verse 1 through 8, are the non-Jewish nations of the world at the end of days. So if you,
I just want to pause and make a note before we finish his section here. I want to let him finish because I do think he's on to something about this Israel is a servant, but there's something more that isn't being discussed yet, and that is him getting chills and Cora getting chills. You know how many Christians get chills over this too? But I want to make it an interesting note, okay? By like parent-wise, descendant-wise, right? At least Muslims claim to be descendants of Hagar, all right? They claim to be descendants and children of Abraham through some biological or genealogical line. Jews claim to be, more often than not, unless they're religious converts, to be biological or genealogical from Abraham. Christians come along and they're reading this extremely genealogical, narrative throughout the biblical text, and they claim to be children by adoption through, fictive inherited children of, I would say, a tribal entity that evolved, of course, to be global, but like they're claiming heritage to someone that, clearly I argue Abraham probably didn't even exist. I'm not sure if he did or didn't, but I would say it's likely he didn't. It's more mythical. And I think Thomas L. Thompson's done a damn good job of arguing for that, and that was problematic when he published it. But either way, it's just interesting that Christians latch on to someone else's narrative so strongly and found a way to be persuaded that they're also part of this family. Like they need to be children of Abraham to be saved. But then Paul has, I think, this really wild explanation that the seed, singular, Paul says, is of Abraham is Christ. So you need to be born of Jesus in you. You need to be in Christ, this wild pneuma type of cultic mystery, including yourself into the family of God by the Spirit of Christ, who is the seed of Abraham. What is going on here? I mean, this is wild to me.
Know that the nations are speaking about the remnant of Israel. You've got your answer. They read it out of context. Why? Because Christians are evil? No. Forget about what goes on YouTube land where you see insanity go on. And there's a lot of crazy people out there, full disclosure. But the average Christian really means well. And they just need to understand these things in a thoughtful, sober way.
Absolutely. That's actually, it's very interesting because you covered the interpretation of Isaiah 53 very similar to the way I understood it. Because what I always try to do when I read the Old Testament is always, as you said, read it in context. The book of Isaiah is a very detailed, but simultaneously very difficult book to understand if you do not read it in its entirety. So when I read Isaiah 53, I found it very difficult to take from it that it was Jesus. Because it was very obvious to me, especially somebody who tries to read the Hebrew Bible as much as I can and get as much context as I can, when it's speaking about they sinned and we, I believe it talks about bearing the punishment for the people's sins. It's very obvious to me that this is referring to the righteous remnant of the children of Israel, the nation as a whole. Mm-hmm. And the way that I understand it, because I try to tie it to passages both in Jeremiah and in Lamentations, which is authored by Jeremiah as well, where it talks about being like a lamb led to the slaughter. Now, I don't believe that the servant is Jeremiah. However, I believe that Jeremiah is an example of somebody that is righteous, that came from Israel, who bore something like that. So he can be used as an example of such, because in Jeremiah, he says very explicitly that I was like a lamb being led to the slaughter. And Jeremiah, who also authored the book of Lamentations, in Lamentations 5:7, he speaks and he says that our ancestors or our fathers have sinned and we bear the iniquity, we bear the guilt, and we bear the punishment. So it's very obvious that the servant in Isaiah 53 is not a singular man by the name of Jesus Christ that Christians try to push this narrative as, but rather it's speaking about the righteous individuals or the righteous remnant of Israel bearing the iniquities for the people who essentially are not obeying God, such as what we see today, the Christians and whatnot. And another example of what they use to prove
those damn Christians
that Jesus is, and you mentioned two of them actually in Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 9.
Okay, now we're getting off because Isaiah 7 is we're dealing with the virgin birth. So, okay, this is important. Isaiah 53, Rabbi, and I think Korah seems to be convinced by the same argument. It's obviously Israel, right? Or the faithful remnant of Israel. And that ultimately it seems like that case is closed. I want to slow that down because the honest answer is that this is one of the most argued questions in the entire field, and serious scholars land all over the map. So saying it is obviously the remnant is the same move the rabbi accuses Christians of, declaring a contested reading as if it's completely settled, and it's not. There's literally dispute. So first, I think it's important to also point out this section in Isaiah is 2nd Isaiah, chapters 40 through 55. So it's written during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century. That alone sinks the idea that is this crystal ball predicting Jesus 500 years early. And on that, the rabbi and the scholars do agree. All right, that this, you got to look for a historical precedent. I think anyone who's serious, like she said, I'm trying to find something back here, not 500 years into the future and trying to figure out, or even later, if you assumed Isaiah really wrote this section, it'd be even older. And that's important. So the fight is about who the servant is inside the 6th century. If you recognize chapters 40 through 55, reading 1 is Israel it's Israel or a remnant, period. A remnant of Israel. This seems to be the rabbi's view. So let me just pull up the text. This is important to show you. This is important. Here we go. Okay. So we're in Isaiah 41 here, okay? So Rabbi, this is his view, and it does have a lot of support. Earlier in 2nd Isaiah, which is 41:8, but you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend. And then, of course, on the right, you see Isaiah 49:3. He said to me, you are my servant, Israel, in whom I'll be glorified. The medieval rabbi Rashi pushed this collective reading hard, and most traditional Jewish interpretation follows him, which is what Rabbi Tovia Singer is in line with. Among modern critical scholars, Harry Orlinsky argued strongly that the servant is the people and not a Messiah figure. So this reading is a respectable one, and I've thought, man, he's got a great point, because over and over the servant in Isaiah is representative of Israel, okay? But it isn't the only move, and I want to give you a little bit more. There's a second reading and a third, but we'll get to that. The servant is an individual, okay? So this is what Rabbi Tovia Singer doesn't lay out. I think we need to know. A large body of critical scholars say the servant in chapter 53 is a single person, not the nation. The reason is pretty simple. In the 4th song, the servant suffers on behalf of the people. You cannot suffer on behalf of yourself. And the text describes a man who dies and is buried. So let's go to Isaiah 53 here, verses 8 through 9. By a perversion of justice, he was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? For he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. They made his grave with the wicked and his tomb with the rich, although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth. Now, are we going to say Israel was put in a grave with the wicked and his tomb with the rich? You could. I mean, one can read this as corporate or even remnant Israel. But there are a lot of scholars who have noticed that it looks like an individual, maybe in light here. And then you go to Isaiah 49, verse 6. It seems, to be a bit sharper, where the servant has a job to do toward Israel, which means the servant cannot simply be Israel, unless you're trying to argue that it's the remnant of Israel trying to save Israel, like a break off of Israel, two Israels. It is too light. Where are we at here? It is too light, he says, a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, Israel, and to restore the survivors of Israel. I will give you as a light to the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. So you could read this as a remnant. You could read this as an individual who's trying to, save the tribes, the lost tribes of Israel. Bernard Duhm, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, D-U-H-M, the scholar who in 1892 first carved out the 4 servant songs as a distinct set, argued the servant was a real individual, a teacher figure. He was possibly a man who suffered from disease. Sigmund Mowinckel, in his major study, He That Cometh, argued the servant is plainly a specific individual and not the nation at all, and at one stage identified with him with the prophet of 2nd Isaiah himself. R.N. Wybray took that further, arguing the servant is the prophet, and the voices mourning him are his own circle of disciples, not the whole world confessing sin in the Christian sense. Then we have a third reading, okay? Which individual? Reading 3. Once you allow any individual, the candidates pile up. And scholars and ancient rabbis alike have nominated all of these. So you have the prophet of the 2nd Isaiah section himself, Mowinckel in part, Wybray, a Moses-style figure, with the song staged almost like a liturgical drama, and there's several scholars who think that. A royal or Davidic figure, such as the exiled King Jehoiakim. So some have identified this figure with Jehoiakim. Other historical names floated over the years: King Cyrus, Hezekiah, Josiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Job, or an unnamed contemporary martyr. Even the Talmud has an individual and messianic reading. Let me pull that up. Here we are, Sanhedrin. So check this out, right? This is in the Talmud. And the rabbis say the leper of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is his name. As it is stated, indeed, our illness he did bear, and our pains he endured, yet we did esteem him injured, stricken by God, and afflicted. Isaiah 53:4. So the Talmud identifies a character, the leper, all right, of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is his name. So even the Talmud has an individual reading here, not a corporate, or it just depends on where you're reading, what you're looking at. And that's really interesting. So the Messiah, the nickname, the leper scholar, reading Isaiah 53, sick and stricken man as a coming individual. So the simple Jewish version versus Christian split the rabbi draws, in my opinion here in this video, is a bit too clean, but he's just sticking to what he's persuaded of. And Judaism itself has carried an individual reading of this chapter. So it's not only a Christian reading. John Collins, I've interviewed John Collins. I've got several of his handbooks from I have some of John Collins' actual books from his office with pieces of his mail used as bookmarks in some of the books on my shelf behind me. I haven't organized in the proper order my books back here, but anyway, John Collins, everybody should know, Old Testament scholar, brilliant, love him, apocalypticism. He makes a fair point that since the servant actually dies in the text, pinning him to one known historical person forces you to invent a figure we have no other record of. So the most honest thing to say, scholarship has no consensus here. The two strongest options are an unnamed individual, very possibly the suffering prophet himself, read by his followers, or a collective Israel. What it is almost certainly not, and this is in agreement with Rabbi and Korah, is the Jesus reading. He just oversells how obvious the remnant answer is when the field is genuinely split and Judaism's own sources have read it as an individual. So I get it. I'm just trying to be fair here that Rabbi Tovia Singer's, point still stands. I don't see Jesus here. I think that's what Korah is saying. I can see why someone later would have looked to this passage and said, dude, our guy suffered pretty damn bad. Look, I found some suffering passages. Maybe that's our guy. But mind you, he's not the only one. Paul himself, who suffered in the New Testament, identifies himself as a prophet and sees himself as a suffering servant. The teacher of righteousness in the Qumran material that we have a hymn from literally identifies himself as a suffering servant, that no one has suffered more than him. I mean, it's pretty... The way that Morton Smith wrote it in his book, in Charles Worth's writing, a 1992 publication he did, he said, this egomaniac similar to Jesus. I'm like, what? I love his language. Anyway, he's pretty bold. We got a couple of super chats. I got to hit these. Thank you so much. Is it Anon? Am I saying it right? Anon 6775. Thank you so much. Is there a book or scholarship on reading Psalms and tracing the sources back to long forgotten songs of ancient heroes? Interesting question. I started reading Akkadian stories and I have to blink multiple times at doublets and parallelism. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would just go to the best, probably the Hermeneia commentary on Psalms and see where it takes you. It wouldn't shock me one bit, though, if the Psalms we have do trace back to earlier ancient heroes. I mean, I've done so many videos, right, where like Daniel from the book of Daniel, I think is based off of an ancient hero ultimately you find him in the Hebrew Bible, but he's spelled Daniel, and he's listed along with, I believe, Enoch and Job. Enoch and Job, or Noah and Job, one of the clearly mythical characters. He's listed among them as an ancient figure from the prophet's own past. And then when you find out that in Ugarit, there's a character named Daniel, who also is a wise person. I don't think he does interpretations of dreams, but he's a wise person, and he stands at the gate. And there's so much overlap that scholars have noticed between him and the character of Daniel we find in the book of Daniel in the Bible, that I did a little video showing that just briefly. So I think if you pull on the thread long enough, you're going to find something in the Psalms, I bet, that goes back to earlier ancient songs of something. It wouldn't shock me. Then again, I don't know. I haven't read this. So that's why I was really impressed with the question, because never thought to look in the Psalms. The Psalms can be fun depending on where you're reading. And then a lot of times it's like when I was reading the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, when I got to the Psalms, there were some cool Psalms. And then some of it, like you said, just became like, I got to read. What did I just read? I need to reread that again. Like, I don't even know what the hell I just read. So I'd have to go back through it again and go, huh? And even after I got done reading and knew what I was, like, at least understood what I was reading to some extent, still a little baffled, like, what are they talking about? Like a lion, I'm surrounded, like there's a lot of Hebraic thought in what they probably meant in their original context that, especially as a young man reading this through the King James Bible, I didn't understand. So I personally would recommend looking at the Hermeneia, but I would also just check out any critical scholarly commentaries on Psalms. That's something I would like to look into myself. Thank you for the 20. Really appreciate that. Dan, Dave, RC, thank you so much for the super chat and being a member of MythVision. We greatly appreciate our members. Thank you so much. The Dawa folks want Christians to help them against Israel, but want Jews to help them against missionaries. Hold on. The Dawa folks want Christians to help them against Israel, but want Jews to help them against missionaries. They're just delusional, LOL. Okay, so you must see certain Muslims who want to team up with Christians against Israel, probably in light of like recent events in terms of geopolitics and all that. And then you're saying, but they want Jews to help them against Christian missionaries and apologists, I imagine. So you can kind of see like there's this like battle going on between the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but this is like the enemy of my enemy of my enemy is my friend of my friend of my friend. And it's like, what's going on here? What's interesting. Thank you, Dan. Thank you again for the super chat. Maybe Rabbi Tovia should tell Muslims whether he believes that Jesus was born of a virgin. Of course he doesn't. He can help them find the wall of Dul Qarnayn, the wall of Dul Qarnayn, and trace the path Abraham took to go to Mecca and build Kaaba. Dan, you're hilarious. In fact, I would love to see more of this video. I wonder if they do talk about the virgin birth, because she said Isaiah 7. So that's an odd thing for her to bring up in my view, because I'd be curious to see where it goes from there, because Isaiah 7:14 clearly gets into the whole born of a virgin stuff. That, I'm sure I've heard Rabbi, I've interviewed Rabbi before. He points out that Bethula is actually the proper term for a virgin. And then, of course, it's not what the New Testament tries to translate it as, but the Septuagint has it as a virgin. So that's where it gets tricky. The New Testament prefers the Greek Old Testament over the Hebrew Old Testament. So you have to factor that in as well. But anyway, there's all sorts of stuff I'm sure they're going to cover. Let me ask you this in the chat. There's 151 total from different areas on the internet watching. If you vote, just tell me, would you be interested in me continuing this into a part 2? We are at minute mark 25 minutes, 47 seconds. So if you're interested in me continuing 25 minutes, 47 seconds out of an hour and 18 minutes, I'd like to continue. So please let me know. Give me a little comment in the chat. Say, just type in 1 if that's a yes. and I'll take a vote. Actually, can I vote on YouTube? Let me see. I can make a poll. There's a way for me to make the poll so that you can just vote there. Yes, and I'll put yes and no. It's that simple. We have you on YouTube watching, and there's some on Facebook, and I'm sure on Twitter. Let me do this. With the 90 on here, we got a poll on the YouTube side. So if you're not watching from YouTube, do you want part 2? Yes, no, start poll. Here we go. All right, I created the poll. I see some ones already. So we want to do a part 2, huh? Is that what we're asking for? Part 2? Let's see. We got 93%. So 14 votes with 93% saying we need a part 2. Keep voting, ladies and gentlemen. Keep voting. The amount of ignorance here is insane. People make lies and claim about Islam and have no clue about host. You got to bring a Muslim like the Orthodox Muslim here. Okay. Yeah. What is it like? He an authority figure amongst Muslims online? Like he's like the people they look up to? I'd be curious to know his thoughts about this whole thing. Check my comment. I checked it. Yeah. All right, let me see. Let's see what the vote looks like. We got 19 votes. Most of you are saying yes, want a part 2. Okay, fine. Then we will. Then we will. Ending poll. I'll continue part 2. We will go from there. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. I figure I'd do this. Rabbi, if you watch this, I love you. You know that. I'm just giving my thoughts here. I totally don't agree with a lot of the things you say. Someone said the Orthodox Muslim is a very knowledgeable brother. He's a Muslim apologist. Oh, knowledgeable brother. Okay. And what would be the point in having him come on specifically to address like the idea of how they see the Old Testament, how they understand the historical Jesus? Like what is the interest there? What is the interest? So it is fair to bring Muslim. Yeah, what would be the topic? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what would he be really good at bringing on for? And is there any way that I can get in touch with him? Okay, Orthodox Muslim is one of the more popular Dawa dudes. Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to get his thoughts about this whole ordeal. But I'm curious to know what topic would be like the best to discuss with him. Adam, my friend, just take the cap lock off and write normal. It makes me want to ignore. History of Islam and Christianity? That's a really generic topic. Like that's like a let's just talk about anything about Islam and Christianity kind of thing. So if you would do me a favor, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Well, that's kind of, it depends on what Muslim you come across that might be open-minded. There's going to be tons. I'm willing to talk to apologists. I don't mind. Myth Vision podcast at gmail.com. Okay. There's my email. If you have some ideas and if you are in touch with him, please get in touch with him. And like maybe you can tell him I'm interested in linking up and discussing some of the stuff you guys are interested in hearing. But yeah, I'd be interested to do that. In fact, I would be interested in hosting as a non-Christian, as a non-Muslim, as a non-Jew, a debate between Christians and Muslims on Myth Vision. What do you say to that? What if I hosted? Because look, I don't care. Like at the end of the day, I don't believe it. So what if I hosted a cool debate between, different camps here? Can you go over the ancient Greek philosopher? We're fascinated with ancient Egypt. That'd be a different show. You talk to IPs, so that's fair enough to talk to an apologist from the other side. I have no problem talking to apologists on any side. I talked to Rabbi. He's an apologist for Judaism. I talked to Christian apologists. I've had shows where Muslim apologists call in. So you may not have seen those shows, but I have had those shows. I'm happy to discuss it. I just need to know what topics we're going to discuss. I think you should, since many debates are on biased Christian channels. Well, look, I'm going to be neutral here. And if I think someone's more right or wrong, I'm going to be honest with you. CP ran from Orthodox Muslim last year summer. CP, I don't know who that is. CP. Oh, Christian Prince. I don't know who that is. I'm sure there's a whole bunch. Look, I'm out of the loop. There's probably a ton of stuff here. So, okay, do me a favor. Email me. You got my email. Email me and give me some topics. Give me some ideas. We'll set some debates up too. That'd be cool. The doctor does sound interesting to me as well. I like academic stuff as well. You know that. But yeah, please help me out. There's my email. You saw it in the chat. That would be explosive debate with any Muslim. Check his YouTube, Orthodox Muslim. Oh, he's got a YouTube channel. All right, let me check it out. Orthodox Muslim. Oh, he's got over 100,000 subs. Let me see. This guy. Is this the guy? Let's see. Oh, those thumbnails are pretty rough. F you Muslim piece of what? That's not cool. Okay. So he seems to do like more debate stuff on there. I'm not really sure. Anyway, if you want to send him my email, let me know. And I could probably set up a debate with him and other Christians on myth vision. If he's down for that, that'd be interesting. Hey, let me see. CP is a Christian apologist, one of the OG ones. Huh. I don't know that name. Hey, about 4 times Orthodox Muslim ran in the debate. Yes to the debate. That's Dawa for you. Yeah, I'm definitely not a fan of the like trashy, absolute, like, people trying to dox people crap or anything like that. Someone said he hates, Muslim shaman said he hates other Muslims of different schools. I've seen it. I've seen many Muslims hate other Muslims. Many Christians hate other Christians. You saw the recent Orthodox Christians versus everybody else. Like, it's a thing that happens. Humans do this all the time. Yeah, a lot of them hate each other for sure. Jay and Doc for the evangelical apologetic side. Jay and Doc. Let me look this up. Jay and Doc. Reloaded. Is that it? Jay and Doc Reloaded. Is this it? So it'd be interesting to like have me moderate and have like Christians and Muslims debate and just like, okay, I don't know. I gotta get like acquainted with some of these people. All right, let's see what happens. See what we can do. See what we can all pull together. Everybody pull your sources, go reach out to the Orthodox Muslim, go reach out to whoever the Christian side is that'd be willing to do that kind of stuff. And I'm happy to host it. I'm happy to have them on and even join the conversation. I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. You know me. I'm all about it. So let's hold on. The Orthodox Muslim says that his style isn't Dawa, so don't try to muddy the well. Someone said. Someone must be talking in the chat and they're defending them. All right. Well, look. No more drama. The drama can happen after the debate, okay, or the discussion or whatever you want to have happen. Get a hold of, please. Get a hold of Orthodox Muslim. Get a hold of the Christians. I'm going to be talking with Inspiring Philosophy in 2 days. He could probably point me in direction. He might be interested in joining the discussion. Also, I would like to talk to Dr. Ali Attai. Is it Attai? And get some PhDs on here that know some stuff. I like that. They're very laid back and non-rhetorical. I like that too. I like all of it. I like all of it. This is cool. All right, y'all. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go eat dinner. Email me, mythvisionpodcast@gmail.com. Connect me with some of these people, and we can make something happen. Let's make it happen. All right. Love y'all. I'm out. Never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.